Did you know that people confuse ADHD, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and borderline personality disorder? In other words, sometimes people think they have ADHD, but it's really bipolar 2. Sometimes people think they have borderline personality disorder, but it's really ADHD. It gets really confusing. And so today I wanted to clear up some confusion and give you a bit more information about each of these issues so that you have a better understanding of which one is which. And let me just be clear, this video is not medical advice or mental health advice. This is a video for informational purposes only. You should always seek out the help of a professional if you feel like you need it. Oh yes, and I also forgot to introduce myself. My name is Matt. I am a therapist in private practice. I own a group practice, and I also recently launched an online community for folks dealing with ADHD issues like procrastination, lack of focus, memory, this kind of thing. You can sign up for that group today. No credit card information is required. If you're interested in that, you can check out the link down below in the description. But with all that out of the way, let's jump into today's video. So the first thing I want to share with you is where ADHD, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, borderline personality, where they come from. In other words, how does a mental health provider come up with that diagnosis? These live in the DSM, otherwise known as the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's currently on its 5th edition. It's usually referred to as the DSM-5. Now, it is not perfect by any stretch. So when we look at these different diagnoses, ADHD, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and borderline personality disorder, you'll find them all in the DSM-5. And once you locate them, you'll notice that they all have different symptoms and criteria that need to be met in order to give a person that particular diagnosis. And this is where a lot of confusion happens. So actually in doing research for this video, I found this really great Venn diagram that was created by a company called Inflow. It was reviewed by a psychologist. Inflow looks like it is a treatment program that works with people with ADHD. I don't know them. They just made this really great infographic, so I'll put credit for them down below in the description. Anyway, what we have here is the representation of ADHD, bipolar. I think they included symptoms of bipolar 1 and 2 under the heading of bipolar, and BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. Now, we won't go through this entire thing. I'm not going to read it all to you. And these are not the exact verbatim words used in the DSM. I think it's an extrapolation of the symptoms. But if you look here in the dead center, as if I can't point to it, right? But if you look in the dead center, you're going to see the symptoms: anxiety, depression, irritability, risky behaviors, impulsivity, aggression, mood swings, emotional dysregulation, and rumination, right? These are the overlap of all three. And again, when I think about the confusion that people have, they'll often see things or experience things like impulsivity. And then from there, they think, oh, it must be ADHD, or oh, it must be this. But really, if we don't have a bigger picture, a fuller understanding, a comprehensive assessment done by a mental health professional, we might get it wrong. If we just think one symptom equals whatever, we overly simplify it. So I just wanted to show this diagram because you can see how much of it actually intersects. There's a lot of similarities between all of these diagnoses, and it gets even more confusing when you see it in the real world, right? We can read about impulsivity, but the experience and the observation of impulsivity is very different, right? Someone can say, hey, I am impulsive. And then when we actually learn about what impulsivity is for them, it paints a much broader picture, right? And the point here is that just because we're impulsive or just because we have irritability or up and down moods doesn't mean we can easily determine what diagnosis we have. So I'm actually in the process of recording this video now, and I forgot to mention something. Just because we're talking about the differences between these different diagnoses doesn't mean you can't have all three of them, all four of them, one of them, two of them, a combination. So it's really quite complex. They're not mutually exclusive. So I wanted to make that clear. All right, back to the video. So then what's the difference between all of these diagnoses? Now, the easiest way to determine the difference is by reading the actual diagnosis inside of the DSM. Now, I won't read them all to you. It would take us way too long if I just sit here and read this straight up out of the book to you. What I would encourage you to do, and actually I'll leave some links down below in the description to reputable resources that actually lay out all of the criteria. What I would do is I would go through each one and read through each one. So look at ADHD, read all the criteria. look at ADHD, look at borderline personality disorder, read all the criteria, and so on and so on. And you'll actually start to notice, yes, there are some similarities, but there's also some major differences. You can also take a look. I'll put the Venn diagram back on the screen. You can pause this video, and you can see on the outside of the circle are the major differences where there's no overlap. And again, I think the issue is that we overly simplify or we extrapolate what we think one symptom means, but it's often much more complex. So now what? I'm not sure. Maybe after this video, you feel more confused. Maybe you feel more hopeful. Maybe you're feeling all sorts of things. What do we do next? The first thing is to educate yourself, right? So maybe this video is a great starting point for you to read more about ADHD, read more about borderline. The other thing, and this is probably the most important actually, is to seek out a professional if you feel like you're dealing with any of these issues. It really isn't that simple. It's fairly complex. So someone with training and experience and background, a professional in mental health who's licensed and able to provide that kind of service is going to be the best person to seek out if you think you might be experiencing any of these symptoms. Anyway, hope this video was helpful for you, and I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.